DJ Prince, thanks for coming today. We are offsite for folks who usually watch our podcast in our studio. Today, we are actually in Franklin, Tennessee at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. DJ Prince is the VP of Marketing at Garden Recovery. He's joining us today. We're really excited because we have a meaty topic of brands within the treatment industry, specifically with the size and scale of Guardian going from a number of different brands under the same umbrella to then consolidating that over a number of years to just Guardian Recovery. There's lots of ins and outs. It's a pretty nuanced process, one with a little bit of risk involved as well when you're making these big shifts in an industry with compliance as well as with loyal alumni or loyal referral networks. So there's a lot to talk about. I want to start though, just by giving our listeners a sense for like, what's the scale of Guardian today, both in terms of how many locations do you have, the services that you offer, and then on the marketing side, how big is a marketing team that manages everything?
Cool. Yeah, I'll start with the size. So we're at 22 locations now on our way to 23. We are in 6, soon to be 7 states. So Florida, New Jersey, Maine, New Hampshire, Colorado, Texas, and very soon to a state near you. Wisconsin is on the roadmap. We do pretty much everything in-house at Guardian marketing wise. We do outsource social, and then we'll tap vendors strategically for consulting. If someone's really great at something, we want that expertise, we'll bring them in. But we have 2 web devs, 2 SEOs, paid media manager, videographer, creative director, email and SMS marketing, graphic design. Up until 2 years ago, a very big content team. AI changed that a little bit as far as written content, because that's just an industry-wide shift, as I'm sure most people are aware. But yeah, we're a fairly large treatment organization now, and in a very short period of time. I started with Guardian just about 7 years ago, 3 locations, and we had just opened the 3rd location. So we were Florida, New Jersey, and Maine. So just to give it the expeditious growth there, like that's a lot of expansion in a very, very short period of time. And what we'll get into is like what we thought we knew about brand in the beginning was much different than the way we think about brand now.
Yeah, let's get into that. So more context and setting the stage. There's a concept in branding called house of brands or a branded house. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what that is and what Guardian was when you joined?
Yep. So house of brands, think of Kellogg's. So you have Fruity Pebbles, you have Captain Crunch,
Special K.
You have Special K, right?
Yeah.
You have all these different brands underneath the parent, and other than maybe some small signaling in, a Kellogg's logo on a box, for the most part, they are completely separate entities, right? You think of them as separate products versus house of brands. Good example, maybe hotel chains, although some of them do tweak on it, but you can think like you have the Hilton Garden Inn, the Hilton
Terrace, the
plaza, right? So, but they're all under Hilton. So house of brands is just different brands, separate, not strong signaling between them that they're under a same parent, versus a branded house is the opposite, where everything really follows the parent brand's lead and ties into it.
In Guardian, when you first started, they were a house of brands.
Correct.
So again, how many locations and kind of what were those brands? And what do you think when you started, if you would put yourself back into when those facilities were being started, why did they choose to go that route?
Yeah, great question. So when I started, we had a brand, which we folded up, just closed that location. So we had Boca Detox, we had Immersion Recovery Center, Princeton Detox and Recovery Center, and Pine Tree Recovery Center. So Immersion and Boca Detox were in South Florida in Palm Beach. Princeton was in Princeton, New Jersey, and Pine Tree was in Portland, Maine. And before I started, Guardian was really heavily a business development focused entity. So especially Boca Detox, we were the detox of record for a huge amount of PHPs, IOPs, residential centers in South Florida. And when we opened up Immersion just down the road as a PHP IOP, one of the thoughts was, we don't want to scare away referral partners, right? Like we are their detox. They like thinking of us as a detox only provider. When we introduced the concept that now we're doing HP and IOP and other levels of care, now we're not adjacent to their service. We are competitors to their service. And for a company that was, again, 90% reliant on B2B referral traffic, business development, that was very scary. So the original thought was, hey, let's not upset the apple cart. Let's keep these distinct. And that way in every market we go into, we can maintain that we're just the provider of that service and we don't look like, Walmart coming to town who is just going to take over everybody's, space that's currently in existence. The other piece of it was there was a strong concept of people wanted a brand that felt local. So Princeton is in Princeton, right? It feels New Jersey. Pine Tree is in Portland, Maine, feels Portland, Maine. And Boca Detox was called Boca Detox, right? It doesn't get more local than that. So there was a concept of, people seeking treatment, families seeking treatment, want a local niche provider. And that was the assumption we operated under when we were starting to roll out some of these brands.
And that assumption makes sense.
Yep.
Right. And we'll get into it, but you did a lot of research as part of this, which to help defray some of the risk and also to help guide what you're actually doing. And you learned something completely different. With that research, why did you decide to go that route? Well, actually, first off, the challenges of this house of brands. Guardian started to grow. You started to get more of these localized brands. When did it become or start becoming a challenge to manage all those different companies?
Yeah, great question. So I guess about 4 years ago now, we were deep into our expansion strategy and plan, doing a lot of M&A, a lot of de novo. And there was a point where in New Jersey, in one state, in neighboring cities and counties, we had 3 different brands in existence. So the challenge first from a business development standpoint was I have BD people asking me for 3 different business cards, right? Or actually 4, one for Guardian, one for Princeton, one for Guardian IOP, one for New Pathway, right? So that's a challenge. And when they're going to meet with a potential referral source, and let's just say they're going to a discharge planner at a hospital who is very, very hard to get access to, and is probably not going to remember most of what you tell them. Who do I say I work for? What pamphlet do I hand out? And if they are having a lot of trouble succinctly having a conversation and delivering how we delivered value for that referral source, because they were spending so much time on explaining how the brands were connected. So BD was a challenge. We also had, from a digital standpoint, a challenge just in resource allocation, right? So it's no surprise probably to anybody who's listening to this podcast that addiction treatment marketing and mental health marketing is very, very competitive. It's challenging. And to build 100% unique, separate entities digitally with no cross-pollination is a significant diversion and disbursement of resources. And we got the sense that we were spreading ourselves too thin. It's hard enough to do it with one brand. We're now trying to do it, and this is again like 4 years ago, with not just the 3 in New Jersey, but with close to 10 different brands in several different markets. So there were BD challenges, digital challenges.
Can you just talk about, you said cross-pollination, which is one of my favorite words. It was tough to cross-pollinate. Can you talk about what the benefit is of if you have one brand, you can cross-pollinate better? Yeah. And I guess why could you not with all these different brands?
Yeah. So let's take social, for example. Organic social in the space, I've always found it very, very challenging to do. It's hard to make an impact. It's hard to get people to interact with your content who are potential clients, not past clients, right? So the person who's already in recovery, you can put out content that's relevant for them. They may follow it. You can do a great alumni focus, but with potential clients, I mean, it could be anybody. Anybody could be touched by addiction. So how do you make content that's relevant to them before they're in the recovery cycle? So like, let's just say we had a great piece of content that got a lot of engagement and a lot of interaction, but we did it on the immersion profile, had no effect on the Pine Tree profile or the Princeton profile or any of the other profiles we had set up. So it was just any site that did well or campaign that did well was limited to that location. And the other challenge in a state like New Jersey, let's just say we're running a pay-per-click campaign. We were running, 4 different landing pages. So now we have to figure out what radius are we targeting for which program. And if those programs have overlapping services, but maybe different levels of care, how do we target appropriately? And let's just say someone does land on the Princeton site, but they're really looking for outpatient. We have a Princeton branded site that only does detox. Like it was just over and over again. There was challenges. And ultimately where that got us to was like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like we're taking on all these challenges, all this complex logistics to make multi-brands work. Like we need to validate if this really is the right strategy.
Yeah. I'm sure it was a few years of just increasing challenges, but was there like a straw that broke the camel's back that just made you say, okay, we need to do something?
We have a really, really awesome executive summit every year at Guardian. So people from all across the country, all of our leadership, they come down to South Florida. We go offsite for a hotel for a couple of days in a conference center, and we just game plan, like, what is Guardian going to do this year? Like, what is our goals as a company? What do we want to achieve? And then what do we want to get to in 3 years and 5 years? And it was after one of those executive summits where we had the roadmap of facility openings. And, when I had started with Guardian a few years back, I was like, guys, even when we had 4 brands, I was like, this is, kind of challenging. So you guys know, like really going to be hard to grow each of these as separate digital entities, as separate brands. Can we consolidate? And it was like, yeah, you're probably right, but like we're already doing it this way. And we're already 4 locations. We're already a big company, right? And the kind of realization after one of the executive summits was like, we're not at the finish line. Like we're at the starting line.
Yeah.
And, we're about to do this really, really insane, expeditious ramp up and expansion. We need to answer this question now, because in 2 years from now, when we're not at 5 locations, we're at 15 locations or 20 locations, we're going to be really, really in a hard place deciding how to manage 15 separate brands or 20 separate brands. So yeah, it wasn't like a straw necessarily that broke the camel's back, but like that was the tipping point. It was just like, guys, I don't know if we can do this with 20 separate entities. Like we really need to challenge our conceptions here and make sure they're grounded in fact.
Yeah. This actually adds a lot to the story, and probably to your credit, your marketing team's credit for doing this, because you're telling me there was a roadmap that was projecting all these openings, and maybe it had the names and it had the brands. It seems like there's already a lot of organizational inertia going toward that. So when you were like, hold on, did you have people who were listening to you, or did you have to do something? Like, how did you get them to say, oh yeah, I guess we should pause this thing we're really planning and trying to race toward?
Yeah. There was a lot of resistance. I called a executive session together, and me and some of the other leadership team sat there, and my presentation, I took a treatment entity, one of our competitors, who had a branded house, and I shared their logo, and I said, you guys know who these people are? And everybody said, yeah, of course we know who they are. I said, okay. And then I flashed another slide, and it had logos from several treatment centers on it. I said, you guys know any of these? One person said, yeah, maybe I recognize one, but I don't know who they are. Following slide was to show that those were all actually brands that were owned by the same parent organization. I said, this is what we're missing, is you don't remember any of those brands. You've seen them at conferences. You've ran across them. I'm sure you've seen the logo before, but you don't recall any of them, right? But when I showed you the branded house, you knew immediately who they were, and you had a sense of where they were located. I was like, I think that makes sense for Guardian. And we're a very visual executive team. And the real like exciting moment was like the next slide was just the Guardian logo at the time with all different cities under it, like Guardian Miami, Guardian Del Rey, Guardian New York. And everybody saw that and was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Right. So, and that was like, okay, like I tell you what, we're still going to move forward. We didn't pause. Right. So we can't stop openings. We can't stop the train, so to speak, but we can answer the question. So that opened the door to me starting to, put out a RFP and start vetting brand firms to bring in and do an analysis on helping us do the analysis of the way we should move forward.
Yeah. Awesome. So it's kind of a mic drop moment of like, ta-da,
yeah, exactly.
Look, this is the impact that we could have. That's brilliant. That's genius.
I left the meeting very elated. I was like, yes, we got there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so finally, some folks are seeing like, okay, this makes a lot of sense actually to look into a branded house versus a house of brands. And your next first step, and again, you've got in the background these facilities have to open. The train is not stopping. We need to do this relatively fast, even though it's a pretty monumental thing. And instead of just going and saying, okay, this is our first facility, we're going to rebrand it to this, you did research. And I think research is a hard thing to convince for budget reasons, for time, that it's worthwhile. So how did you convince folks that before we run into this, let's take a beat and just understand what we want to do?
I will give credit to Marco. He's our president, and he voiced like, hey, we should bring in a third party because we have a lot of bias. We have a lot of preconceived notions, and like, let's bring in some independent viewpoints on the project. So I give them a lot of credit for that because like that made sense, but of course I'm thinking budget, I'm thinking time, I'm thinking expense. I'm like, we can do this ourselves. We can save money. We can do faster. And it's like, well, no, it's not about that. It's about like, we want the result to be free from our fingerprints essentially. So the rest of the team kind of nodded. Yeah, this makes sense. And that brought us to, okay, let's find somebody to help navigate this problem. And the case was also too, we did all of our work in-house, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning. So like all of our previous logos or our previous brand development was all done in-house. So like we didn't have huge amounts we had invested into style guides or branding other than the actual marketing of those brands, like the creation of them. So I was like, guys, we saved a bunch of money in the past, like doing this ourselves. We're kind of due, right? If we were a single location operator, we would have went through one of these expensive brand exercises every single time we opened a new one. We didn't have the cost there. So it's kind of payback for that a little bit. And like we have to spend the money now and investigate it. But I think it's a better use of the resource to really understand what our clients want, families want, or referral sources want, and what our employees want.
Yeah. So those questions, what were you seeking to learn through this research and what did you need to inform what you were about to do?
Yeah. So different stakeholders, different questions. So for the family and for the client, do they want that local feel of a brand, right? That initial conception that we had, is that a major decision factor for them? And how big of a decision factor is it? Because I think you ask anybody, would you prefer to go to boutique or Walmart? And a lot of people will say boutique, but how critical, right? Like if what you want to buy is 5 times the price at the boutique, you still want to go there. Like you still may like the idea, but you're going to go to Walmart, right? And not to say we wanted to be Walmart, but like the point is we had to understand the priority levels in our stakeholders for each of these questions. So like I said, client and families, like, do they need a niche and local brand? Is that really what they want in their decision process? For a BD team, how do our BD referrants think about us as a local brand? Like, does a clinician in Portland, Maine feel more comfortable referring to Bishop Health, our mental health brand in Portland, Maine rather, because it's a local brand, or do they not really care, right? Like, are they just excited to work with Jane, who's our BD person up there, and they really love Jane, and no matter what we called it, they're working with Jane, right? So that was one concept for the BD stuff. And then, for our employees, there was a lot of affinity in some cases to the brand they had worked at, especially Plymouth House in New Hampshire. This location has been open for 20 years. Like, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like, if you work there, a lot of your life is around being part of Plymouth House, and we don't want to disrupt that. Like, we have people really committed to the mission there. So we really had to understand how people thought about those qualitatively and quantitatively and understand how impactful they were. Oh, and then the last group, which kind of goes into the client group, was alumni, right? Like, these are people who have had profound life-changing experiences, and they associate that with some of these brands, and they really feel loyalty. Like, those are our brand champions. Like, we don't want to mess that up either. Alumni referring in new clients is like one of our most significant referral sources, right? So like, how do we not break that either? So those are some of the things we went into that process really knowing we needed to understand in its entirety.
Yeah. Did you kind of have, or you or other folks on the team, like a thesis or a hunch for what you were going to see? And did some of the results surprise you at all?
Yeah. So go back to like the boutique in Walmart. We asked most people, do you prefer like a local brand versus a national corporate brand? And the answer almost always is yes for most people.
Local.
Yeah. But we wanted to understand like what else was important and where does that sit on your list? And what surprised us was where it sat on their list. So we talked to families in particular as they were navigating finding treatment for a loved one. The qualitative stuff was really interesting because like we get to get in the mindset of their customer journey process. When you were sitting there and you were Googling treatment centers or recovery.com treatment centers, right? Like, what was important to you and how did you rate that importance? And what we heard pretty often was like, I didn't really even remember what you guys were called after I clicked on your page, or I kind of don't remember what it was called now. I just know that they went to the place in Portland and then they went to the place in Florida. The brand recall was really shoddy for parents. Clients, not so much, but for the parents, it was, for the loved ones, it was really, really not there. And those are the people responsible, heavily responsible a lot of times for getting the person into treatment. The other thing we noticed was like their priority level was availability and cost above all else, and also simplicity. So that was an aha for us, was clients, families, not so much on the in-industry side because they understand the process, but these are people who are getting terms thrown at them like residential and detoxification and partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient. Like, these are foreign terms to most people. And some some of them were like, I didn't really need to have a brand. I need to know like where you were located, what you did, like, and is this what my loved one needs, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you a drug rehab in Portland, Maine? And is that what you do? Because that's what I think I need. We had to step away from this idea of like what we think as the terminology that's best for stigma, for non-pejorative language around addiction. And we all have to match that sometimes with like what's really important and what do our customers understand? Like people know the word drug rehab. So while it may be a pejorative term, like I don't want to go off too of a tangent, but like that's some of the things we uncovered is like we have to speak to our audience. We can preach, but if that preaching is getting in the way of someone actually getting help, then who are we really helping?
Yeah. So how did the idea of simplicity then guide what you wanted to do in House of Brands versus Branded House?
Yeah. On the client and family side, it was one of the things that came up pretty often too is our program is really focused on like a hub and spoke. So inception at a higher level of care and then continuation through lower levels of care, usually at other facilities, right? So Portland, Maine, you'll go into Pine Tree for detox, maybe transition to Plymouth House for residential PHP and IOP, or you'll start in Princeton detox in New Jersey, transition to Florida, do residential PHP IOP in immersion in Florida. So one thing we heard from families about the simplicity was my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, they had such a great experience at Princeton. Like Pine Tree was great. The staff was great. My loved one liked it. They were clear with us what was going on. The communication was excellent. When we got told they were going to another program, sometimes we had no idea that they were owned by the same company. And they were like, that actually didn't help us. That hurt the process. And it made it more challenging for us because we were just like, well, why can't they stay with you? Not knowing that they were staying with us, but in another program. So that was like an aha for us was like, well, again, families in crisis, they're not used to navigating this stuff. Why not just make it simple? Like they're in Garden Recovery Pine Tree, they're going to go to Garden Recovery Plymouth. Like, and we did a co-brand for the ones that had a lot of equity, but like if they're just going to go from Garden Recovery to Garden Recovery, that's so much more comfortable of a process for the client and the family. Because if they're already having a great experience at one of our locations, they have confidence it's going to continue.
Yeah. So it's like they went to Pine Tree for detox and they would have loved to go to Pine Tree for PHP.
Right.
But now you're saying, well, we have Plymouth. And go, well, I don't know Plymouth. I had Pine Tree. Pine Tree was good.
Right.
I succeeded there. I'm uncertain about this.
Yeah.
And now you say, well, this is Guardian Pine Tree and Guardian Plymouth. And that continuation is there. And they say, oh, good, good. I know this place.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, again, in all service of simplicity. It's like people are in crisis. Like we don't need to complicate this. We need to make it as simple and straightforward and like reduce the anxiety that they're having in the process as much as we can. And we can do that with simplicity. And again, it goes back to where that sat on the priority order versus having the localized brand. And like it was such a reoccurring theme in the qualitative and quantitative studies, like of hearing that, like I needed simplicity, I needed straightforwardness, and I didn't need complexity, that was a huge factor in guiding. And then the other thing I would say too, on the business development side, kind of heard the same thing. And we heard something else that was kind of surprising too, which was, I didn't know Guardian had as many locations as you guys do, which hurts us, especially like, let's say we're meeting with a union representative who maybe is part of a national labor union, right? And we met with them in New Jersey and they're going to a union conference and they're talking about, finding addiction treatment providers. And maybe they work with Princeton in New Jersey and they'd say, oh, this great program in New Jersey, talking to the colleague who has a place in, Denver, Colorado. The guy's like, oh, I wish we had something like that in Denver. And that union guy's like, yeah, it sucks because Princeton's only in Princeton. Not knowing that Guardian Recovery in Princeton is Guardian Recovery, Cura West in Dallas, Colorado. So BD gave us that feedback too, is like, I need simplicity, right? Like I'm a EAP person, I'm a union person, like I'm an HR person, like my whole world isn't finding treatment sometimes for people. So like, give me simplicity. Last thing I'll say too, is that question about how do you refer and testing that concept of like scaring away referral partners in industry. So like I call like two-way referral relationships, like detox to a PHP or PHP back to detox, or, kind of two-way between two providers with different levels of care. There is an effect. I won't deny it. Like, I think people in that world like to not work with a direct competitor with the level of care they offer. So like that was true. It was something we had to weigh out. But when we looked at the one-way referral relationships, was what I call them, which is like discharge planners at hospitals, clinicians, EAPs, union representatives, people who are expecting essentially nothing back from us in return other than to take great care of their members, their patients, their clients. Their response was like, oh, I don't refer to immersion. Like our CEO, Josh, had a great relationship with a clinician. She's like, I refer to Josh. Like wherever Josh tells me to send this patient, that's where that patient's going to go because I trust Josh. Same thing in New England. Like they were like, I work with your rep up there, and like wherever that rep tells me to send the client, that's where they're going to go. So that was another interesting thing for us. It was like, okay, well, again, if having disparate brands for the referral relationships that are really most valuable for us is the ones that are, not expecting anything in return, essentially, let's make the process simple for them because they're demanding simplicity. And they also don't really have a lot of weight at all on the brand because they work with people, not brands.
Yeah. It's kind of curious. You did this huge project where you're unifying all the brands under Guardian. And I feel like this is a hot take, but is brand actually important before someone steps in your door? Or is brand only important as kind of anchoring in that person what they just experienced so that they can go somewhere else connected to your network, or so that they can refer someone back as an alumni?
Brand absolutely is important. And the thing before we even did any of the consolidation was like we went around the country, and again, like the two-way referral relationship stuff, like trying to keep like our partners happy. Like they all knew Guardian was the provider who operated all these facilities. Like it was no secret. Like people in the BD world talk, like everybody knows who owns every facility. So like that perceived installation didn't really matter. And we have a great reputation. Like we realized we were missing a potential of like putting up a Guardian flag in New Jersey and putting a Guardian flag in Colorado and building on that respect and reputation that Guardian already had. We also realized that we were wasting a little bit of our credibility across our patients by having disparate brands, because let's just say we had great testimonials for Princeton. Like they didn't really carry weight for the place in Denver, even though the models are the same, the processes are the same, the way we operate is the same. So brand does matter. I mean, a bad brand will kill you. A great brand, if nothing else, just helps, again, that patient journey have more confidence in your legitimacy and make one less thing more difficult for them as they're trying to navigate something really, really confusing and scary.
Right. So you did this big research project. You're getting all the results. You find these surprises. It's one thing that you're like, this is great. This is what we need to move forward. But then you need to convince everyone else that what you're seeing in the data is what we need to take action on. You already had a mic drop moment with the 3 slides showing the house brands and the branded house. How did you then convey this information in a way that everyone understood it and then said, yep, sign me up for this mission?
Not easy.
Yeah.
Especially because we had a bunch of data and a study, people believe in their perspective as they should. So there were still some like thoughts of like really clinging to some concept that made a house of brands difficult. So the way we kind of navigated that was, well, let's do it with one and see what happens. Like can we minimize the risk for testing this out? And if we were wrong, like we can scale back and it won't be detrimental to the organization. And if we're right, then we'll at least have another step of validation in that process. So
can I just ask, what were some of those enmeshed beliefs about having a house of brands that people were really clinging on to, that going into this pilot that they're going to be looking for out of the data you get?
I think we, and I say we as like people in the mental health or behavioral health industry, are so close to it that we see differences in levels of care, in demographics treated, and even in the type of disorders treated as significant differences worthy of differentiated branding. Like because we're so close to it, like we think that maybe an adolescent program needs a different name than an adult program, or mental health program needs a different brand than an SUD program, because we know and understand those differences. And what I think the tough thing is like to get yourself in the shoes of a person who does not live in this space, right? Our clients and their families and loved ones, and say, are those differences really significant for them? And do those differences make a difference in their customer journey and selection process? So that's the thing that I think we battle with the most, is like we walk into a conference and we see XYZ adolescent program and we're like, oh, we know they're adolescent. Like they're doing it. They own it. Like that matters, like we know that this place is doing mental health and not SUD, and like, cause that's all their brand is and that matters. And like, we see that separated so often, but like breaking that and understanding what really the clients and their families see is tough. That's the enmeshment that's like really hard to break, is just being so close to this and like thinking that those things do matter. And not to say that some of them don't, like not to say that any of that is wrong. Like I think there 100% is an increase in conversion, in program attraction, if you build something that's 100% specific to what that person is looking for. Like, I don't doubt that. It's about the value of that versus the cost of it, right? And so that's the tough thing, is like those things aren't wrong. So you have to like get past that. Niche branding is better, but for the cost, it is not. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's nuanced. No, that's awesome. You did great. Back to the pilot. So you said, well, because we have you have a huge network by now. Doing this all at once, that's not going to be feasible. Right. And you also have, this is kind of untested and it's uncharted for a lot of folks. So you decided, let's start with a pilot. Let's judge, I'm sure, like certain metrics just to make sure that this is working the way we want. And also, I'm sure, teaching lessons for should you do this with other ones, you got to know how to improve. How did you decide on which facility to actually run this at?
Great question. The real fun part was one step before that was figuring out what these places are going to be called. So now we knew everything was going to be Guardian, but then now actually discovering like how we're going to differentiate each location. That was another journey that we're still somewhat on.
Yeah.
But the first one we picked was Pura South, it was called at the time. And the reason we selected it is it was a new location, did not have a long established brand, not a lot of existing brand equity. It was also, from a revenue contribution standpoint, not a significant part of Guardian's portfolio at the time. So we thought it was an easy one to test with the least amount of risk. So what we did was establish KPIs that we wanted to monitor throughout the process so we can test it. Did AMA rates change for clients? Did staff retention change? Did digital performance change? Like, what was it effect on CPA? Did we have loss of BD relationships? So we had a spreadsheet with like 500, it seemed like, KPIs that we wanted to monitor with this shift. And then the other big risk aversion piece for us was insurance. When you do a name change, which we decided to go a legal name change, like we didn't want a DBA. We wanted it to look intentional and feel like we were bought into this. So we went legal name change. And there is a point when you're changing your name that like your corporate state registration may not match your NPI number registration. It may not match your tax ID number registration, might not match the name that's on your license, because it takes time for those things to catch up. They have to be done. They're linear. You can't do them simultaneously. So our fear was like, are we going to get a bunch of denials from an insurance company because the license didn't match the documentation note, because it didn't match the tax ID for that week or 2 weeks, whatever the period was. Yeah. So we had a bunch of KPIs to measure all the different aspects of the change. And then also we selected the one that, God forbid, there was a huge disruption in insurance reimbursement. It wouldn't, knock us out. It would not be fun, but it wouldn't take us out.
Yeah. So did the sky fall down?
Not. So the biggest one we were worried about was insurance disruption. No issue. We learned a little bit about like the order of operations after the first one. Like, okay, the IRS is going to take 3 months. So no matter what we do, we got to count on the IRS taking 3 months to change the tax ID name. We, and then we build a little bit more accurate kind of Gantt chart of how the stuff is going to roll out. But as far as all the other metrics for Tampa, Pura South became Tampa, Guardian Recovery Tampa Addiction Center. Everything else stayed steady. The things we wanted to stay steady, no different in staff retention, no different in AMA, no different in alumni, returning to the facility, and our digital performance went up. That was a location that, because we had an opportunity to really detach completely from the existing brand, because it didn't hold much, we can pick a name that positioned us in a good place for local SEO. So almost immediately the gains we saw in local SEO admissions were very evident. So that produced a really good drop in CPA at that location. So we saw a location that was the pilot. We gave it a few months to settle and watch what happened. We looked at all our KPIs and we were like, okay, this works. And that became the template for the next location. And the next location, we're still in the process. Some things held us up. Like we had contracts in process and we couldn't change names with contracts in process. So we're still working on the rollout. But at this point, we are very dialed in on these are the steps in the process. This is how we're rolling it out. This is when we inform the clients. This is when we inform the families. This is how we do the name change legally. And it's been like clockwork for the last year as we've been proceeding forward.
Yeah. So how long did it take from starting the research to kind of completing that pilot?
Too long.
Pilot. Yeah. A couple years, half a decade.
No, starting with, I think 15 locations at the time, but I think we were at 7 or 8 brands. No, maybe 12 brands. We are 12 brands and about 15 locations. When we started the process, I think around 2022. So it's been about 3 years.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of that was hey, the first one we did, the IRS took 6 months to change the name, and we were like kind of holding pattern for that, so it unfortunately took away some of like the fanfare around doing like a global name change like very quickly across the board. Like we had to stagger it, which I don't love, but it was for a purpose. Like we wanted to minimize risk. What I will say, we halfway through the process, we realized even though we're going to do legal name change, we wound up DBAing all the additional locations to their future name, and that allowed us to do a mass rollout, which we're about to push out in the very near future for the remaining locations, and then work on the legals. But I mean, we didn't know that. We learned as we went through the process.
So we were talking a little bit about the name convention. Yeah. How did you decide that? What was that conversation like, and what did you land on?
So the short kind of concise answer is any location that had really strong existing equity, like Plymouth House, great example, open 20 years, staple of treatment in the New England area. Like I don't think you can walk into a recovery meeting or a recovery circle in, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine without somebody knowing Plymouth House. We didn't want to lose that. So those locations, we did a co-brand. So Garden Recovery, Plymouth House. Tampa, different example, right? Locations that didn't really have the equity, didn't have, a reputation that was longstanding that we were really concerned about safeguarding and holding on to. Those we did a combination of service offering and location. And that was for two reasons. One, a little bit of a SEO play for local, but also in service of clear communication for our families, right? So like Guardian Recovery, Montville Adolescent Center, right? So like in Montville, Adolescent Treatment Center. Guardian Recovery, Saddlebrook Counseling Center. Counseling Center was the name we chose for anything that's mental health and SUD. So that was like counseling was the name we chose those. So, but like it's Counseling Center, it's in Saddlebrook, part of Guardian Recovery. So like, again, that was really trying to get in service of clear, easy communication for clients and families.
Yeah. And with these stronger brands, was it just like common sense? Like, yeah, everyone knows Plymouth. That is a strong brand. Or did you look like any metrics to like measure brand equity?
Yeah. We did some like NPS, Net Promoter Score stuff around the existing brand names. But again, we're not like Coca-Cola. So the sample size on that data is not great. So we used a bit more, I guess, just intuition and gut on those. Yeah. So like that was more of a discussion internally and really a gut of like, what does the existing name on a lot of these mean? And we did keep a lot of them and did like the co-brand route. It's really been a lot of the net new stuff we've been rolling out is following the new format a lot closer.
And the mechanics of rebranding. I don't want to skip over this. We don't have to spend a lot of time at it, but there's a lot of things that need to change. I mean, we went through the legal stuff, like just the name documentation.
That's like this much of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole iceberg under the water. I don't know if you could just laundry list or even just shout out the team that was responsible for this, just to give people a sense of what it actually takes, what you need to change, how you find all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So our web development team, John and Mark are on our team. That's re-skinning the existing websites. We're working on a new template across the board now that'll give us like consistent following the new kind of Guardian Recovery brand guidelines everywhere. But like, Tampa Addiction Center, Curacao, that transition was a good example. That's updating site colors and logo and naming throughout the site and fonts. Like on the digital side, it's notices to family and referents and clients and alumni. That's like email campaigns. That's notices at alumni events, social media blasts. It's simple things like your phone tree. When someone calls in now, and let's just say they were a past client and they're saying, I want to talk to Curacao, and I'm getting presented with the prompt of Tampa Addiction Center. How do we handle that? So it's like, there's so many little pieces, and we have like a name change committee that we established at Guardian. So it's myself, it's HR, IT, legal, compliance, billing, and like contracting with insurance. So we have like a little committee. We meet 15 minutes every 2 weeks and we just say, where are we at? What's pending? Everybody on the same page? Is there anything that's holding us up? Very similar to like a Grum check-in. Just like, what are you working on? What's your goal? Is there anything blocking you? Great. Let's keep it moving. But yeah, like the digital side, I'll shout out like Dennis is on SEO. That's another big thing. Like name changes disrupt local SEO, right? So like, how do we manage that? Oscar on PPC, new landing pages, new campaigns, right? Across the board. Like we called out the facility a lot in the ads, like those all need to be changed. Curtis is our creative team. So that's like new brand guides, new print material, like new trifolds, new one pager, like it's a lot. Yeah. Like, so I will say like the in-house team we have is excellent. All my guys are great and girls. And yeah, the rest of the Guardian team and all the different departments outside of marketing, a lot of the stuff is just as critical for them. Updating the medical record system, updating the HR system, updating the paycheck, like all that stuff is part of the process when you're doing a legal name change.
Yeah. So, when you're presenting that 3-slide deck and you're saying, this is what we could be, Guardian New York and Guardian Colorado. And they said, yeah, let's look into this. Did you know the monumental task ahead of you? And do you think it's been worth it?
It's definitely worth it because the look, the feel, like what Guardian is now and how it presents in the world, I think is better than it ever has been. And I think it's better than it ever could have been with House of Brands. And that matters. And that means something for us as a company internally, but for our clients and the people we serve. And going back to like our primary focus in everything we do, even name changes, is client first. Is this improving the patient experience? Is this improving client outcome? If the answer is yes, we're doing it. If the answer is no, then we're not. And like, I believe that this change has made the client journey and the client process easier and simpler to understand. And it helps more people find treatment with Guardian. And I think if nothing else, that makes it worth it. Did I anticipate all the nuances that a name change entailed? No. But I think even if I did, knowing what I know about how it can make a difference for someone who's navigating a crisis to have simple, clear communication and assist them in that journey, it would always be worth it.
Awesome. Again, putting yourself back to before you started, would you have any advice for you or just for someone else who is about to embark or considering doing this? Any things that you learned, hard lessons along the way?
I think the biggest takeaway is don't let your biases like cloud the reality. I think independent bodies to help you in your testing are important. I think that no matter how your marketing channels are balanced, try and take yourself out of somebody who is like looking like this all day at addiction treatment and mental health treatment and behavioral treatment, and think about it as someone who is looking at it for the first time, because those are the people most likely that we're serving and need to be in service to in how we're showing up. And if you can do all of those things and really come with a clear and unbiased analysis of your strategy, you're going to get to the right spot and keep that client first like mindset in place. And I think you'll get to the right place.
And have fun.
Have fun. Absolutely. This has been fun, and like, all the nuance and like the data and this and that, like it seems daunting, but like this is the stuff that like I get excited about. There was no part in this process that I was like, I hate this. Like the whole part was like, this is exciting. Like we're doing something and we're making it happen. And like to see the new brand like show up on signage and it's like, oh, it's real. Like to see, the new website and like branding come alive, like that's real. I get excited about this stuff. And like, I think it should be like an exciting process. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of conversations and meetings that happen in between that were difficult, that are challenging, but like they're challenging because everybody is so invested in the success of the organization. No one doesn't want us to be successful. It's just like, we may have differences of opinion on how we get there, but that's fine. And that's good. And that's healthy. And that's how we get to the right answer.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything about the whole process that we didn't talk about that you think is important to mention, or do we cover most of it?
It's been a journey. The journey continues. I am very happy with the way the Guardian brand has evolved, and our goal is to be the household name on the level of the Betty Fords, or and I don't think we could have gotten there any other way other than really building a parent and going full force nationally with it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me. If you want more from DJ, follow him on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Under Donald Prince on LinkedIn. And where can we learn more about Guardian?
GuardianRecovery.com.
Thanks, man.
Awesome.